Hi everyone, welcome to another card making video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm using a lot of Copic coloring along with the supplies from the My Monthly Hero August 2019 kit to make this medieval themed card. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by building out my scene, and I'm using the Build a Castle stamp set. This was an add-on to the My Monthly Hero August 2019 kit, which means that it was sold separately and you can buy it separately on its own. I'm putting some Neenah Solar White cardstock into my mini MISTI and just using this clear acetate grid to line up my stamps. I like to use this grid a lot when I'm lining up stamps to color on a sheet of paper when I'm not cutting them out. If I'm cutting out the stamped images, then you don't really need to line them up. But when it's really important to line them up, I like to use this clear acetate grid. And this just makes sure that the stamps are nice and straight and that they're evenly spaced from the top to the bottom, however you want them to be. And that clear grid is really inexpensive and you can buy it as sort of a separate thing to your mini MISTI. So I'm inking up the stamps with my Gina K Amalgam ink, which is a nice Copic friendly ink. And although I'm not showing it, I do end up having to stamp it 2 or 3 times to get a really good impression. I'm just cleaning off the stamp with my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois, and then I can go back in with the rest of the castle stamps. So here you can see that the castle is now built out with all of the different stamp elements, and I'm using a Copic multi-liner to fill in the little gaps that the stamps just didn't get to. I didn't line them up perfectly beside each other. But whenever that happens, that's totally fine. This Copic multi-liner is a really good way to just fill in any gaps that ever happen in your stamping because it's nice and black, so it really matches the ink well, and it's nice and thin, so it kind of matches the lines that you get on a lot of stamps really well too. I'm just finishing off the scene now with a few clouds that came with the set, so I'm going to stamp them here in the same color and just kind of add some detail to the sky. So on the left you can see that I'm done my castle scene, but I want to add a moat because the bridge has to be going over a moat. So in order to do that, I want the moat to go under the bridge. So I have to mask off the bridge so that I can stamp the moat on top but have it look like it's under. This is actually just a post-it note, but a post-it note that has tack on the full post-it note rather than just that little top bit. So that when you stamp and cut it out, like I'm doing now, the whole back of it is actually still sticky and you can just stick it right onto your stamped image and it will stick down nicely. So I'm just finishing cutting this out, and you don't really need to cut out the thin little black kind of chain parts that are meant to be the chain. Because you can just stamp right over those and you would never even notice. So when you're cutting out masks like this, keep that in mind. You don't always have to cut out every little intricate detail. Some minor things like that, they wouldn't be noticeable anyway, so it really doesn't matter if you cut them out of the mask or not. So I'm just putting the mask onto the bridge and then laying the stamp for the moat over top. And I'll pick that up with my mini MISTI and ink it up and stamp it out. This part of stamping I always find really fun. It's sort of like the big reveal. When you mask something and you stamp over it and then you pull off the mask and you can see how your stamped image came out and how it kind of looks more three-dimensional. It's so fun. So there you can see the bridge going over the moat. So there's the castle scene all stamped out with the castle, the bridge, the moat, and a couple clouds. And when you make masks like this, what I like to do is I like to just keep them in the back of the stamp pocket. And that way you can always use them again. So if I ever decide to stamp out this bridge again, I'll probably want to stamp another moat, and then I'll just have the mask ready to go. So it sort of makes your life easier in the future. Now I'm going to be coloring this whole scene with Copic markers. And I'm just going to speed up the video here so that you can see the coloring come together without having to wait the entire time that it took me to color this, which was a while. For the castle, I'm using some cool gray tones, and I'm using 3 different shades here. I've got C5, C3, and C1, with C5 being the darkest one and C1 being the lightest one. My general technique for this is not complicated. I am certainly not an expert Copic colorer by any means. I actually don't have an art background at all, and this is very much just a hobby for me. Any tips that I've picked up from watching other people who are much better than me at it on YouTube, and kind of just like picking up little tips along the way. So I'll share with you what I've learned, but I definitely recommend if this is something that you're very interested in, there are so many good YouTube channels out there where you can watch people color and hear their descriptions and their explanations of how they're doing what they're doing. But for me, what I like to do is I like to color with the darkest tone first. I generally lay that down in areas where I think that there would be shade. I kind of imagine a light source usually coming from the top, maybe like the top left, and just sort of color sort of then the bottom right sides of things with a dark shade. So once the dark shade is laid down, I pull it out and blend it out with the medium shade, and then I blend it the medium shade with the light shade. And that is the thing that I've always loved a lot about Copic markers, is that they blend so well, especially when you have shades that are close together. What I normally do after I've done all that is then go back in with my dark shade to accentuate the shadows. And this is just to really bring dimension in. I find if I don't do that, then it almost blends too well and you kind of don't see the shadows as much as I would like. So going back in with the dark shade at the end is a nice way to sort of add that extra dimension and really bring out a pop of color that you're looking for. So as I've been talking, you'll see that the castle is now completely colored in. I also used a group of yellows and oranges to color in the windows just to make it look like there's some lights on inside the castle. I then used some nice fun blue, purple, and green shades for that stained glass window at the top, and some nice BG tones for the water, and this is just to give it more of like a watery, almost like turquoise look. I also used some browns for that bridge. I believe I used E15 as the main color there, which is a really nice wood tone brown that I use a lot. So now I'm coloring the lawn in front of the castle, and for this I'm using a few YG shades. I started with YG17 and then went in with YG41, but I quickly realized that these two colors actually weren't blending together as well as I wanted, so I came in with YG03, which actually ended up being very nicely in the middle. And this is something that you can definitely do whenever you have two Copic markers that aren't blending together very well. See if you have something in the middle. And I found for this, especially, YG03 was the perfect middle shade, and it really just blended those two dark and light shades together really well. Then I'm going in with some blues and just sort of outlining the castle to make it look like the essence of a sky, but I didn't want to fill in the whole paper with blue because I just didn't want it to be too overwhelmingly colored. I wanted it to sort of fade out to nothing and be a little bit paler in the background. So that's what I'm doing there, and I'm also using the colorless blender or the zero marker to really blend out the edges. The colorless blender is just plain alcohol with no pigment, so when you lay it over other pigments, all it does is push them around and sort of blend them out. So that's it, the coloring of the background is done. I decided that I wanted two of these medieval characters to be standing in front of the castle along with the sentiment. So I picked out one of the women and one of the men, and I want them to be looking at each other as if they're talking. So I'm stamping them again onto some Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I just got a small scrap here. I like to keep my scraps of Neenah Solar White because I stamp so many different images on them to color, and it's just good to keep your scraps on hand for when you have like the odd small image like this, or the odd small two images that you want just a small scrap to stamp on. I really like Neenah Solar White for Copic coloring. It really allows the alcohol markers to blend so nicely, and it's just a perfect bright white paper. So here I'm coloring the woman's dress in pink. I really wanted her to pop away from the castle. I had colored the castle in sort of a gray tone, the sky in a pale blue, and I wanted this woman to be sort of a focal point of the card, so I wanted your eye to be drawn to her. So I chose some RV shades of pink for her dress, and again I'm just adding the darker shades in where I think that there would be shadows. And I'm using some yellow colors just to add some accents. So then I'm just finishing her off by coloring her skin and her hair. I then went back to the knight with some warm gray tones, and I did this because I knew his armor had to be gray, but I did want it to stand out a little bit from the castle, and I had used those cool gray tones for the castle, so for him I used warm gray, and I figured that would kind of make it a little bit different. This kit came with coordinating dies for all of the stamped images, which is amazing. I don't usually buy the coordinating dies for a lot of stamp sets that I buy because I have a limited budget for stamping supplies, and if I'm going to be spending a certain amount of money, I generally like to spend it on more stamps. I find often you can almost get 3 stamp sets for the price of 1 stamp and 1 die set. So I generally go for the stamps, although that is not to undervalue having the coordinating dies. It is so nice. I loved that they came with this kit. It just makes your life so much easier. You spend way less time fussy cutting, and I find the results look a lot more professional. They just look cleaner and nicer overall, so I'm really glad to have the coordinating dies for this set. So for the final aspect of this card, I'm going to stamp a sentiment into this really cute banner image, and I figured there's no better paper to stamp this on than the parchment paper that came with the kit. It actually looks like it's a scroll, which I thought was really cool. I'm just pulling the stamps out of the set here and laying them onto the paper. So I just cut off a small piece of that parchment paper and I'm stamping it in my Mini Misty again. Again, I'm just using the same Gina K Amalgam ink just to keep it consistent with the rest of the card. So there you can see I stamped it, and I'm just lining up the sentiment to be placed within the scroll like it's written on the scroll. So the sentiment I chose was, "I sendeth thee warmest wishes," which I just thought was so cute and medieval themed and almost like something that the woman could be saying to the knight or the knight could be saying to the woman, and that's what they could be talking about on the card. So now the final stages of assembling the card together. Here I've got a piece of gray cardstock. I believe this is actually Stampin' Up! Granite Gray, which I cut down to have a card base that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so the standard A2 size. And what I'm adding tape to here is just a rectangular piece of fun foam, which I've cut down to be just slightly smaller than the card front that has all the images on it. And this is because I'm going to now tape it to the back of that piece and have it give the whole card front a little bit of dimension. I like doing this for an added touch because I find it just adds a little something to the card, something a little bit more fancy than just having the whole card front glued down flat. It kind of pops and it makes it a little bit special. So I'm again adding some double-sided tape to this side of the fun foam, and then I'll peel the backing off and add it down to my card base. I like this big, wide, double-sided tape for this type of application because it covers a big surface area. So when you're doing a whole card front, it's just a good way to get a nice, even layer of adhesive. So now I can just take my card front, make sure that I'm gluing it on in the right direction, which is a mistake I've made before many times, and just tape it right down to the card base. And when you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you're getting it as straight as possible because it is pretty much impossible to pull it up once that double-sided tape is stuck down, let me tell you. But it's okay. I mean, if it's not straight, also don't worry too much about it, which is another mistake I've made many times. You can't beat yourself up because at the end of the day, it's a handmade card. If it's a little bit crooked, nobody's going to care. I mean, you are the one that's going to care the most. So now I've added some foam squares to the back of this banner, and I'm just taking my craft tweezers and placing it on the card front. I'm just lining it up and trying to figure out exactly where I want it. It was unfortunate that I realized I was covering up one of those clouds that I had stamped, but I do like the placement of the banner there above the castle, so I just went with that. And then I'm just giving the same treatment to the knight and the woman. So I'm just putting some foam squares on their back and then laying them on the card, positioning them right in front of the castle on the lawn. So again, it's like they're standing outside of the castle and talking to each other, which I think is really fun. So there it is. But of course, me being me, I couldn't finish off the card without adding a little bit of bling. So I'm placing some Studio Katia April crystals into my triangular dish, which is just a really nice way of keeping your crystals organized while you craft and not just having them spill everywhere onto your desk. And I'm taking my jewel picker and just kind of, as artfully as possible, placing them onto the card just to add a little bit of extra sparkle. This card is otherwise a little bit flat in terms of like it's just a background and a couple of images popped up and everything's colored the same. So I thought that these crystals would add a little bit of sparkly visual interest. And I just used some Ranger Multimedia matte to glue them down there. So there it is. That's the finished card. It's just some simple Copic coloring really with some scene building, but I do love the way that that princess pops with her pink dress. So thanks for watching this card making video with me. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!